application to implement programs authorized by the Sustainable Transportation and Energy Plan Act. It's Commission Docket number 16-035-36. My name is Michael Hammer, and I'm the Commission's designated presiding officer. Let's go ahead and take appearances, beginning with Rocky Mountain Power, please.
Good morning. This is Emily Wegener for Rocky Mountain Power. With me today, I have James Campbell, a company employee who will be adopting our comments and providing a summary. I have co-counsel Marie Durant, Janice Saba, and then also I have with me Mark Mansfield, who will be adopting the study that was attached to the application and providing a summary. And Robert Hammer, who is participating and helping with the study, a consultant with SLR Consulting who's available for questions, but will not be providing a summary.
Thank you. And for the Division of Public Utilities?
Good morning. I'm Justin Jetter with the Utah Attorney General's Office, and I'm here today representing the Utah Division of Public Utilities. With me today, I have Robert A. Davis, who will testify for the division at today's hearing. For the folks on the call who are not familiar, he'll show up on your screen as Bob Davis.
Thank you. One moment. Ms. Harrison, were you trying to say something? Ms. Harmon, I'm sorry. Ms. Harmon, you can't hear us? Melissa, can you contact her by text and let her know that we're all able to hear each other just fine? Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed since this is being recorded. Thank you, Mr. Jetter. In the Office of Consumer Services.
Yes, the Office of Consumer Services. I am Robert Moore. I'm from the AG's office, representing the Office of Consumer Services. With me is Bella Vaste. He's a utility analyst from the office.
Mr. Hammer, I think you are on mute now.
That was inadvertent. Are there any preliminary issues before the company calls its first witness?
Yes. Before we begin, I have a couple of corrections to make to the application. In the application, the company moves for approval of step funding under two different provisions, Section 5420-105 for innovative utility programs and Section 5420-107 for other programs. The first correction I need to make is that the specific subsection under 5420-105, which is stated as 1H in the company's application, is actually 5420-105-1I. The second correction I would like to make is that the company is no longer pursuing approval under Section 5420-107. While the company believes the program is cost effective in the sense that the potential benefits exceed the cost of the program, the company has not performed a detailed analysis of these benefits, and so will just proceed under Section 5420-105-1I only.
Thank you. All right, is there anything else before Ms. Wegener calls her first witness? Go ahead, Ms. Wegener.
The company calls James Campbell.
Mr. Campbell, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
Mr. Campbell, will you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, my name is James Campbell, James Campbell.
What's your business address?
1407 West North Temple, Suite 310, Salt Lake City, Utah.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Rocky Mountain Power, and I am currently the Director of Innovation and Sustainability Policy.
What other roles have you had leading up to this position?
I joined the company in 2007, initially as an environmental analyst in the Environmental Policy and Strategy Group. I've also worked in government affairs and customer innovations within the company. I've been in my current role since 2019, and prior to joining Rocky Mountain Power, I worked at the Utah Division of Air Quality.
Thank you. What has your involvement been with the STEP legislation, the legislation that we are pursuing approval of the program today, and other programs that have been approved under the STEP legislation?
Yeah, so I was involved with the initial STEP filing and the application and a lot of the program development and analysis. I've also participated in legislative committee hearings both prior to the passage of the STEP legislation and after, sharing with legislatures some of the successes and progress of the STEP program.
Thank you. Have you ever testified in front of the Utah Public Service Commission before?
Yes, I have. I filed testimony in support of the other STEP projects, including the Gatsby Curtailment Program, and which is an innovative project that addressed emissions in a non-attainment area. And most recently, I provided testimony on the Intermodal Hub Project, which is a innovative technology project that looks at developing a power balance and demand control system with the university.
Have you reviewed the application filed by the company on March 3rd, 2021, and the reply comments filed on April 23rd, 2021 by the company in this proceeding?
Yes, I have.
Do you adopt those reply comments as your testimony?
Yes, I do.
At this time, I'd like to move to admit the company's reply comments.
They're admitted.
Mr. Campbell, can you please provide a summary?
Sure. Well, good morning, Mr. Hammer, council and parties. It's great for me to be back. I see a lot of welcome faces. I've been out for a while, so it's good to see everybody. But on March 3rd, 2021, the company filed an application requesting STEP funding to support a Utah State University study on projecting the impact of the electrification of the Uenta Basin oil and gas fields on air quality. The company is requesting to provide the Uenta Basin study project with an amount of $200,715, and as supported in the company's application, sufficient STEP funds are unallocated that can be used for this project. The company has identified the study as providing a variety of benefits, including one, identifying what pollutants to target to most effectively reduce ozone events in the Uenta Basin area of Utah. Two, identifying ways electrification can facilitate reduction in the emissions contributing to the high ozone events in the basin. And three, producing data on the general feasibility and potential benefits of increasing the supply of electricity to a rural area with high oil and gas production and associated high ozone levels. My testimony focuses on the appropriateness of the study as a candidate under the enabling STEP statutes and provides an overview of the company's response to the positions taken by the Division of Public Utilities and the Office of Consumer Services. With me today is Dr. Mark Mansfield, who is a research professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry for Utah State University. Dr. Mansfield's testimony will focus on the details of the project proposal, including the company's application as Appendix A. Also with us today is Mr. Robert Hammer with SLR Consulting, who will be partnering with Dr. Mansfield at Utah State University to complete the study. Mr. Hammer will not provide a summary today, but is available for questions pertaining to the certain aspects of the study, and in particular, the benefits of the study for the company's oil and gas customers in the region. The Office of Consumer Services stated in their comments that they found the Uenta Basin study to be very promising, and they support providing step funding to move forward with the study subject to two recommended conditions: a phased funding approach and a reduction to the funding level. The company respectfully requests that the Commission not adopt either of these recommendations. Dr. Mansfield will address why a phased funding approach is not feasible for this project. With respect to the reduction in the funding level to remove indirect costs, I reiterate that the indirect costs are typical for a university study. In fact, there are other approved STEP projects that provide funding for studies conducted by the university that are included with similar levels of indirect costs, including the coal bed methane, which also included indirect costs.
I'm going to impose an objection here. That's outside of his comments and therefore constitutes live SIR rebuttal, which is not called for in the scheduling order.
Ms. Wegner?
The studies that Mr. Campbell is referring to are on the record in this docket, but I agree they're not in the comments. So if you would prefer, he can skip the part referring to other portions of the record in this docket.
I think that would be appropriate, Mr. Campbell.
It would be appropriate for me to skip it, or appropriate for me to
skip it. I don't think the other parties will notice that those issues were going to be discussed today, and the record's quite extensive going back to 2016. So okay. I'll go ahead and sustain the objection. Then you can proceed with the rest of your testimony.
Okay. The Division of Public Utilities recommends against approval of the company's application for several reasons. They claim that the study benefits will flow to not only RMP customers, but also the other customers of Moon Lake Electric. This is not a reason to deny STEP funding to the study, as it adds an important piece of information for a relatively small amount of money. Furthermore, the STEP pilot program was intended to support these types of projects. Dr. Mansfield addresses the division's other arguments, including the additional information the division claims is lacking from the study. I recommend the Commission approve the company's application as filed. The Uenta Basin study is a prudent use of available STEP funds and will provide valuable information to aid ozone reduction efforts in the basin. Thank you for your time, allowing me to present my testimony in support of the Uenta Basin study. This concludes my summary.
You're on mute, Ms. Wegner.
Thank you. I have nothing further for Mr. Campbell, and he is available for cross-examination and questions from the Commission or from the hearing officer.
Mr. Jetter.
Hi, good morning. I do have a few questions, Mr. Campbell. In the comments that you've adopted this morning, the company's been, and the company by company I mean Rocky Mountain Power, has been critical of the division and its comments recommending disapproval. And as part of that, those comments said that the division has been critical of the company for not providing all of the pieces to a complex puzzle. Is that correct?
That the division, that the company has not provided pieces to a complex puzzle?
Yeah, that was the company's description of the division's objections.
Oh, okay, yes.
And I'd like to ask you a few questions along those lines. Do you think that it would be reasonable for utility ratepayers to pay for a study of something that is either impossible or highly unlikely to become reality?
I believe that it is reasonable for ratepayers to provide funding for the utility to work on innovative programs to, especially since the electric industry is in massive transformation. And so I do think it is reasonable for ratepayers to provide, particularly under the STEP statute, to provide some funding for innovative programs, so the company can be positioned to address current issues.
Okay, but I'm not sure that quite answered my question. My question goes to, what about the scenario where the item being studied is either extremely improbable or impossible? So maybe I'll give you a hypothetical of, would it be reasonable for customer ratepayers to pay for the study of a cold fusion reactor with today's information we have?
With today's information, I'm not an expert on cold fusion, so I do not know if cold fusion was a good innovative project, and maybe it would be, but I don't know. If you look back to maybe 1989 when cold fusion came about, but I'm not an expert on cold fusion, so I don't know if that would be reasonable. I'd have to look at the actual prospect of it and to determine if it was reasonable. But right now, I don't know.
And in making that determination, wouldn't you think it would be reasonable to perform at least some high level or background look at whether the cold fusion in this example were a plausible technology?
So should I do a background about if I was trying to apply? If your question is, if I was trying to apply the to do a cold fusion project, should I do background work on cold fusion? Is that what your question is?
Well, shouldn't you at least at a base level, before you spend money researching the effects of it, give some high level view of, does it work?
So I would.
Does it work?
So I think it is appropriate to do a certain review of a technology, which is really what we're proposing to do right now, is a very preliminary assessment of this electrification. Electrification is not cold fusion. I mean, those are completely two different types of technologies in terms of out there, but doing a very preliminary, I mean, I think that's kind of what we're proposing right now, is to do a very initial assessment to determine whether or not this is if this is a stepping stone to go down the path.
Okay, but as part of that sort of just basic background, high level review, the company didn't ask any of the oil and gas mining operators of these wells if they were interested in electrification, did it?
Well, in terms of the specifics, that's what we have Dr. Mansfield and also his colleague here today, who could really answer some of the very specific questions related to that. So if we wanted to talk really specifically about that, we can have about the project, about its role. I know Mr. Hammer is an expert and what does work with oil and gas customers. So I'm pretty confident that oil and gas customers are familiar with this technology and are looking forward to it.
Okay, and so I'm going to read to you, I don't know if you have the DPU comments with you, or the data request responses from the division. If not, I can simply read to you what Rocky Mountain Power told the division when we asked this question. And what I'm
Sure,
looking
go
at
ahead.
is DPU data request 15.6, where the company asked if Rocky Mountain Power, Utah State University, or SLR had any correspondence with well developers regarding the changeover from oil and gas to electrification. And Rocky Mountain Power's response was that Rocky Mountain Power has not communicated with well developers regarding the potential changeover from natural gas powered pumps to electric pumps that is being evaluated in this study. And that's part of the complete answer. It goes on to, I'll summarize that Utah State and SLR have not had any formal discussions, but maybe have had some informal discussions, and no correspondence formally with the well owners. Doesn't that seem like it would be something reasonable to ask the well owners whether they're interested in this?
So electrification of wells is a pretty common play. It's not cold fusion. So it's one of those things that there's definitely been interest with other oil and gas. I know nationally this has been a topic of discussion. So it's not like this is an imaginary conversation that would be a complete surprise to those to our oil and gas customers out there. And we've had various levels of conversations, but maybe not specifically to this specific project, but there's been other types of conversations in general related to electrification, especially as I have mentioned nationally. This is an ongoing type of evaluation, especially as we see nationally a push towards electrification and broader areas related to fugitive emissions and other types of applications like this. So it's not like this is a foreign topic that would be a complete surprise to these operators.
Sure, but you didn't actually ask these operators if they were interested in doing this.
I personally did not. And
Rocky Mountain Power did not, that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of very specific conversations for this project. I know that there's been other types of conversations with customers, but I'm not aware of specific conversations for this project. But as I said, Mr. Hammer with SLR is an expert in this area and is very familiar with the oil and gas customers in the area.
Okay, and would you imagine that it would be primarily based on the economics, whether an oil and gas pump operator would switch their oil pump motive force from the combustion engines to electric?
There's a lot of factors that goes in it, and again, Mr. Hammer can elaborate on that. But economics is definitely one, but part of that economics is the regulatory aspect of it. And operating in a non-attainment area is a major challenge, and especially for our customers that live in the Uenta Basin. Oil and gas is one of the primary kind of economic activities out there, and being in a non-attainment area for ozone is a really big deal for both those individual operators, but also all of our customers that are out there. So when you talk about the economics, it's a combination. It's the direct economics, but also the economics associated with the complying with the regulations and the different regulatory requirements.
Okay. But Rocky Mountain Power, in this case, did not have any estimates of the costs, either at an individual well basis or in general for the electrification of these pumps. Is that accurate?
Correct. This is the very beginning. So before you want to go down this full path of do we start making major investments in electrification, one thing you want to make sure is, well, is it going to matter? Is electrification actually going to make a difference for the broader non-attainment area classification? So that's why this is really the first step. And then if this passes, so to speak, where it will make a difference, then you can start going down that next path of evaluating the economics and the actual specifics of the electrification of those wells.
And before you spend $200,000 studying the chemistry of the air quality, wouldn't it make sense to do a back of the envelope calculation to see if the economics are even in the realm of plausibility?
And I, again, on the specifics related to the oil and gas, I believe Mr. Hammer can answer some of that.
Okay. And wouldn't Rocky Mountain Power isn't Rocky Mountain Power in a good position to be able to do those back of the envelope calculations on the cost of Rocky Mountain Power's infrastructure that would be necessary to reach these pumps?
Well, there's a lot of factors that would go into it, and a lot of assumptions that would go into it. What is some of the future regulations? So you can kind of start getting into this analysis creep, like where do you draw the lines and whatnot. But really, before you want to go down that path, you'd want to make the determination, does it even make a difference in terms of the air quality? Because this is really about studying, does electrification make a difference in the air quality in that region? If it doesn't, and it could come out where electric won't make a difference, then we don't have to address any of those other issues of doing those analysis and that further study. So this is really just that beginning analysis step, and even where you could, as you're talking about some of those back end, this is the beginning of that.
Okay, well, but if you can't economically provide electricity to the wells, the air quality really doesn't matter, does it?
I wouldn't say you can't economically. I wouldn't say that you can't do that economically.
What's your basis for that? Because Rocky Mountain Power has told us in data responses that they've done no analysis of that.
That's what I'm saying. I couldn't say yes or no either way.
Okay, so we don't know if it's economically possible to provide.
Correct. You're asking me to hypothesize about something that I don't, that hasn't been done. And and that's a pretty extensive analysis. But before you do that, what we want to do is do this study to make the determination it's relevant to do.
Okay, and you haven't even tried at any high level to even get a ballpark of what that would look like.
I have not.
Okay, and Rocky Mountain Power hasn't either, that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I know that there's been broader evaluations for electrification, but there's so many assumptions and factors that go into. So when you look at some of these broader things, it may, unless you really got to do a detailed, very specific to have it be relevant.
Within the study, at least as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, part of the study would review provide analysis of the distribution of costs between the oil and gas industry and Rocky Mountain Power. How would you suggest that can be done without any information on the costs of providing that electric service?
So some of the analysis of the proposed study would look at that. Is that what you're? I'm sorry.
Yes, that's what Rocky Mountain Power told us in a data response. And I'm curious how you would suggest that that's going to happen without some information on the costs of providing the electric service. I don't know how you analyze the distribution of costs without knowing what the costs are.
Well, you'd have to.
Can I object to the general reference to our data responses? If you're going to point Mr. Campbell to a specific data response, that's fine. But just saying that that's what Rocky Mountain Power provided in the data response isn't sufficient.
Okay, this is data response 15.3, and it's about midway through the responsive paragraph.
And additionally, excuse me, Mr. Campbell was not necessarily involved in preparing these data responses and may not have the information about them completely. He adopted the comments and not the data responses. So I would object to questions, assuming that he has knowledge on the data responses as well.
Okay, maybe I'll
Mr.
ask.
Jeter, you're certainly allowed to ask about the data request responses. But Mr. Campbell, to the extent you don't know the answer, of course, you should answer truthfully. So the objection is overruled.
So I don't know the answer.
Okay. Maybe I'm going to change gears to a little bit of a different couple of questions. When you've discussed the potential benefits of this study and potentially even the benefits of the electrification of these oil and gas wells, those benefits are primarily air quality benefits for the Uenta Basin. Is that right?
For our customers?
I guess it would be residents of the Uenta Basin, which are largely some customers of Rocky Mountain Power, as I understand it, and some of Moon Lake and.
Yeah, I would say the benefits. There's kind of I'd call it three layers of benefits. There's the air quality benefits. There is some also direct economic benefits for our oil and gas customers. There's some other benefits, economic benefits as well for our Uenta Basin customers in the Vernal area, because their economy is pretty dependent. But then there's also for all of our customers, I think having more familiarity and experience working with electrification in general, and seeing where some of these by electrifying to eliminate or improve air quality benefits, we're going to be posed to do that more and more as a society. I think if you look at just the current administration, just the current trends that are happening. So the more exposure and experience we get working on that does have an additional benefit. Obviously, it's not as direct as some of the direct benefits of air quality in the basin, but there's still some tangential benefit to the company of just getting experience working on that.
Okay, and so those are, we're talking about air quality and potentially job creation benefits. None of those benefits you mentioned are customer utility rate benefits, are they? They don't. There's no projection that utility rate customers will see lower rates as a result of this.
No. These are benefits that are basically in the interest of our customers, and under the statute, that's really what we're talking about under innovative utility programs, is whether or not these types of programs are in the interests of our customers. And actually, if you look at in the statute where they talk about what are the types of programs that the legislature directed or at least authorized us to work on, those include, if you look in there, there's economic development. That's the type of project, and then there's also, they talk about solar generation, but they also battery storage. But there's also a program to curtail emissions in non-attainment areas. So those are the types of programs the legislature intended for the utility to work on under the innovative utility programs section. And so this Uenta Basin study is consistent with both an economic development, and it's consistent with both a air quality project in a non-attainment area.
Okay, and I think that I understand that these are right. These are sort of general benefits to the public at large.
Correct. Yeah, this is in our customers' interest.
And the public at large happens to include some of your customers. Yes,
our customers in Vernal in particular, which is the largest community in the area, that's most of our customers in there, and it is definitely in their interest, this project, definitely.
Because of the economic job creation benefits.
The combination of the economic development and the emissions, and a program to help address the emissions in the non-attainment area.
Okay, and just to make sure it's clear on the record, the emissions problems in the non-attainment area are not the result of Rocky Mountain Power's emissions. These are a result of oil and gas field and other source emissions.
Well, that's what I think we want to, that's what the study would evaluate.
Okay. Rocky Mountain Power doesn't have a generation facility in the basin, does it?
Rocky Mountain Power does not. But there is a question about, transport of NOx and ozone, all that kind of stuff, and which is part of the basis of the study, is to evaluate what is the source of the air quality challenges in the basin. And the good doctor, the good professor could probably get into that a little bit more than I can, but we don't know, and that's one of the reasons why we want to do the study.
Okay.
But you're correct. Rocky Mountain Power does not have a generation facility in the Uenta Basin.
And Rocky Mountain Power is not at risk of environmental rules from the Uenta Basin causing it to have to shut down a generator or discontinue service or change its own service. Is that right?
Not that I'm aware, but you can kind of go down this whole path of how you do environmental regulations, and if there is, there could be down the road if it's determined that other facilities are impacting the area, then there could be an impact on our facilities. But I'm not aware of it right now. But there is that potential.
Okay. I'm going to ask you just a few questions about Moon Lake Electric. Is it accurate that Moon Lake Electric is another electric utility that serves a large portion geographically of the Uenta Basin?
Yes.
And are you familiar with, or were you involved in any of the conversations that occurred between Rocky Mountain Power and Moon Lake Electric about this study?
I was not involved in any of that.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge of whether Moon Lake Electric has either the ability or the interest to build facilities out to serve the oil pumps that are in Moon Lake Electric's service territory?
I don't know. I wasn't involved in that. I do know that there was a meeting with Moon Lake Electric, and they did not oppose this project.
Okay, and that would have happened sometime between when the division asked you about that in DPU data request 15.5.
I believe that's correct. I believe that was after. I believe that was after.
Okay. So all we know at this point is the other electric service provider doesn't oppose this study.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Those are all of the questions I have for you this morning. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Mr. Moore?
Just a few questions. Hello, Mr. Campbell.
Good morning.
I would like you to direct your attention to the section of the reply comments that discusses the purpose of the Uenta Basin project. On page 2, under the heading Purpose of the Study, could you please read the last and concluding paragraph of that section into the record, starting with there are now supportable?
Okay, I didn't get the first part. I apologize. I had difficulty hearing you.
I'm sorry. Let me ask you again. I'm just directing your attention to page 2 under the heading Purpose of the project or project's purpose. There are 3 paragraphs. Could you please read the last paragraphs into the record, starting with there are now supportable indications that NOx emissions have become a controlling factor?
Yeah, I would defer the specifics to the project to the professor who's here, and Dr. Mansfield, who could address that directly. I don't have his I'd have to pull it up. I don't have it right in front of me.
Well, this is a portion of the comments I'm asking you to quote that you adopted from your.
No, I know, I understand. If you allow, I don't have it memorized, so I got to pull it up. I apologize.
Yes, could you please read it? Thank you.
And that was in the
No, that was
Appendix A. I'm assuming in the.
No. I'm talking about your actual comments on page 2.
Not the reply comments, but what we.
You only have reply comments. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that's what.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, okay, I got him. I apologize for the delay there.
Could you read the last paragraph under the heading project's purpose, starting with there are now supportable indications?
I'm sorry, what page was that on again?
Page 2.
Oh, okay. All right, the last paragraph before the response to OCS comments?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, yes, it says, there are now supportable indications that NOx emissions have become a controlling factor after years of reducing VOC emissions. Indications of a change from VOC control to NOx control should be examined to see if they prove to be true. To what degree the NOx control theory is true, why it might be true, and if NOx emissions reductions will be effective and plausible going forward. If the study's working hypothesis is confirmed, the results will change both the focus and efficacy of ozone reduction and regulatory efforts in the basin.
Thank you. Could you turn to page 4 of your reply comments, the last paragraph, second sentence? You state, quote, electrification could affect more pollutants than NOx. In particular, it could play an important role in further reducing VOx emission. Did I read that correctly?
You said on page 4?
Page 4, your reply comments. Tell me when you're there.
Yeah, I'm on page 4.
In the last paragraph, I'm just going to read it to you.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Additionally, OCS's comments imply that feasibility of electrification is only, okay, go, I'm there.
Okay, you state electrification could affect more pollutants than NOx. In particular, it could play an important role in further reducing VOx emissions. Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah.
The role of electrification to reduce VOx emissions is not part of the paragraph of the purpose of the study that you read into the record. Is that correct?
Your question is that VOCs are not part of the original study?
I'm asking no, I'm asking whether it's part of the purpose of the study that you just read.
About VOC emissions?
About NOx emissions, where you stated now there's supportable indication that NOx emissions have become a controlling factor after years of reducing VOx emissions. That paragraph that you just read states the purpose of the study. And my question is, did the role in electrification to reduce VOx emissions, that's not part of the paragraph of the purpose of the study that has been read into the record. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I'd have to defer to the professor who's going to do the study on that. I don't.
Again, I'm quoting from your comments that are that you've put into the record. So you must have some understanding of what the purpose of the study is, since you adopted comments that discuss the purpose of the study.
Maybe I'm confusing because you're saying NOx and then you're calling it VOC? Are you referring to VOCs?
I might.
Because that's not a term of art. There's no such thing as a VOC. They're referred to as VOC.
Okay.
So that's why I was getting confused. I apologize. I just didn't know what you were talking about.
I apologize. That's my fault. So let's try it one more time. This rolling electrification to reduce VOC emissions is not part of the paragraph for the purpose of the study that's been read into the record. Isn't that correct?
It does talk about VOCs.
But is it part of the purpose of the study that you just read into the record?
As the purpose of the study. I'd say it's a side benefit.
Right.
And what I read into the record did include the reference to VOCs and reducing VOC emissions.
Well, that's after years of reducing VOC emissions. So that's not, that's referring to past attempts to reduce ozone by reducing VOC levels. It's that part of the quote is not related to the purpose of the study.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of, it's an additional benefit of the study. And again, I'd like to defer to Professor Mansfield on the specifics of the study, since he's the one who's doing the study. But what I read into the record, the paragraph you had me read into the record did refer to VOC emissions.
The only reference to VOC emissions comes in the following sentence. There are now supportable indications that NOx emissions have become a controlling factor after years of reducing VOC emissions. Isn't that the only place in the paragraph on the purpose of the study that you read into the record that mentions VOC emissions?
Yes, that mentions VOC emissions, what I read into the record, yes.
Well, I think your testimony speaks for itself. In fact, the VOC emissions have been reduced by how VOC emissions are reduced by electrification was not actually included as part of the purpose and the goal of the Uenta Basin study, which was filed with your application. Isn't that correct?
I don't think you can, I mean, you're talking about these emissions don't happen in isolation. They're connected.
Yes, but again, you have a section in the comments that comes under the topic purpose of the study. I'm just asking, is it the general purpose of the goal, the purpose of the Uenta Basin study that to reduce VOC emissions?
The purpose of the study is related to ozone reduction, because that's the non-attainment status. And what contributes to ozone is both this NOx emissions and VOC emissions. But there's a highly complicated chemical reactions and dynamics that's going on that the professor can talk, that's definitely more qualified to talk about than myself, but they're related, because these are all emissions and byproducts of fossil fuel combustion. So they're related.
I didn't ask you if they were related. I'm going to finish this off, Mr. Hammer. I didn't ask you if they were related. I asked, is reduced VOC emissions part of the purpose of the statute as you set out in your comments?
Do you want me to rule on your motion to strike, Mr. Moore?
I won't make a motion to strike now. If it continues, I will.
So the question is, are VOCs the purpose of the study? Is the reduction of VOCs a purpose of the study?
Yes.
I think they're related. So it is part of the purpose, but it's a secondary benefit. But the primary, and again, the professor can talk to it, but the primary is related to these NOx control. NOx is the primary controlling factor.
Isn't the study meant to determine whether the controlling factor in the Uenta Basin for ozone pollution is NOx emissions and not VOC emissions, as previously assumed?
I think so. I think that.
I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry. Are you?
Oh no. I apologize. I was just having difficulty, and it could be the microphone or the speaker on my phone. I'm having difficulty hearing you, so I apologize.
I apologize. I'll see if I can speak louder and more clearly. I think we got your answer. I want to move on to a specific statement you made on page 4 of your reply comments.
Okay.
You stated VOX emissions from tanks are often controlled with flares, which reduces emission to about 5% of the potential tank emissions. Using electricity to control the emissions would increase the efficiency by 20-fold, reducing the emissions to only 0.25% of the potential tank emissions. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
It's true then, isn't it, that only 5% of the VOX emissions remain after flaring?
Yes.
And that means electricity would only be helpful to remove a portion of the remaining 5% of the VOC. Isn't that correct?
That what would be?
Electrification.
Okay, electrification. If there's flaring, well, for VOCs, correct. But VOCs have a big impact. But I'll defer to the professor in chemistry. But yes, there would be 5% left.
Finally, these percentages on VOC emissions that I just mentioned, they do not appear in the application or anywhere in the record before they appeared in your reply comments. Isn't that correct?
I believe that is correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I have no further questions.
Before we go to redirect from Ms. Wegner, I'll just apologize. I've had a few network issues. I don't know if you all have noticed me popping in and out of the call. I think I've heard everything. I think I'm still hearing all of the testimony. So don't be concerned about that. We should be getting it all on the record. If it continues to be a problem, I may have to dial in and you'll just hear my voice. With that, please go ahead, Ms. Wegner.
Thank you. I just have a few questions, Mr. Campbell. When Mr. Jetter was asking you about impossible or unlikely to become reality programs, would you characterize the electrification of the Uenta Basin oil and gas wells as something that is impossible or unlikely to become reality?
I would not characterize electrification of oil and gas wells in the Uenta Basin as improbable, or I would not characterize it like that.
Do you know whether the company currently provides electric service to oil and gas sites within the Uenta Basin?
I think there might be some. I'm not aware. I think there might be. I know we do provide electric service to oil and gas wells in other areas. Would you agree with me that if there is electric service to oil and gas wells within the Uenta Basin and in other places, that would indicate that at least in some circumstances it's economic to provide electricity or to electrify oil and gas well sites? Yes, it can. Electrification can be economic to provide that for oil and gas wells. It can be, definitely.
And Mr. Jetter asked you questions about analysis that the company's performed concerning electrification of the basin. Are you familiar with all of the electrification analysis performed by the company?
I am not aware of all of it.
And then finally, Mr. Jetter talked to you about the STEP statute and benefits to customers. Is it your understanding of the STEP statute that programs need to benefit customers as ratepayers, or, just that? Is that your understanding, that it must benefit them as ratepayers?
No, that is not my understanding. My understanding of the statute is that these innovative utility programs the commission just needs to determine that they're in the interest of Rocky Mountain Power customers, not as the traditional ratepayer, but just the kind of general interest.
So it's your understanding that the economic interest or the air quality interest of customers would satisfy the statute?
Yes, that is my understanding, and that is consistent with public hearings with the legislature, and yes, that is my understanding.
Thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Campbell.
I have nothing for you, Mr. Campbell. Thank you. Ms. Wegner, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, the company calls Dr. Mansfield.
Would you like to do recross, Mr. Jetter?
I would, yes, please.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief. You were asked on redirect about an inference that because there are existing electrified wells, maybe 10 on Rocky Mountain Power system in that area, that must mean that it's economical to do so. Do you have any knowledge of those wells or the economics of those wells?
No, I don't. My indication that it can be economic. I think it would have to obviously be it's site specific, but as a general technology, electrification can be economic to support oil and gas wells. That was what I was trying to say.
Okay, and the Rocky Mountain Power didn't reach out to even the existing customers it has and ask them about that?
I did not.
Okay.
I'm not aware of.
And then quickly with respect to the benefit as ratepayers, would you say as a policy, it's appropriate for customers of the electric utility to pay higher rates to create jobs in the community?
I think the legislature created the STEP Act to encourage the utility to work on innovative utility programs, to look at a whole host of types of technologies and programs that will benefit our customers and in their general interest. And so I think that's appropriate.
Okay, so you do think in some situations it's appropriate for utility ratepayers to pay higher rates to create jobs in the community generally?
As part of the STEP Act, I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. That's all of my recross.
Mr. Moore, do you want an opportunity to ask any additional questions?
No, Mr. Hammer, thank you very much.
All right, we'll go back to you, Ms. Wegner.
Thank you. The company calls Dr. Mark Mansfield.
Dr. Mansfield, do you swear to tell the truth? Is Dr. Mansfield on the line?
Let me check.
Yes, I'm sorry. It took me a minute to unmute.
We all make that mistake. Do you swear to tell the truth, Dr. Mansfield?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Morning, Dr. Mansfield. Will you please for the record?
My name is Mark Mansfield. That's Mansfield.
And what is your business address, Dr. Mansfield?
Bingham Research Center, Utah State University, Uenta Basin, 320 North Aggie Boulevard, Vernal, Utah, 84078.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am a research professor in the chemistry and biochemistry department of Utah State University.
Have you ever testified before any public service commission before this?
No, this is my first time.
Well, welcome. Did you prepare the research proposal attached as Appendix A to the company's application entitled Projecting the Impact of the Electrification of the Uenta Basin Oil and Gas Fields on Air Quality, which was filed on March 3rd, 2021?
Yes, I did.
Do you adopt that Appendix A as your testimony in this matter?
Yes.
I move to admit Appendix A into evidence.
It's admitted.
Did you also assist with the preparation of the reply comments filed by the company on April 23rd, 2021, which were admitted earlier in this proceeding?
Yes.
And have you prepared a summary of your research proposal and a portion of the comments that you would like to share with the commission?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Hammer, council and parties. I appreciate this opportunity to address. I am a research professor and scientist at Utah State University and the author of the research proposal that is attached to the company's March 3rd, 2021 application entitled Projecting the Impact of the Electrification of the Uenta Basin Oil and Gas Fields on Air Quality. The purpose of my testimony is to explain the scope of the study and the impact it could have on the electrification of the Uenta Basin. I have an extensive background researching and modeling ozone in the Uenta Basin. I have worked on many projects and published many papers and reports on ozone and its relationship to the oil and gas industry. I live and work in the Uenta Basin, which means I have both a professional and a personal interest in improving air quality in the basin, all the while supporting the most important industry in the basin to the most important industry to the basin economy, the oil and natural gas industry. Over the past decade, USU has worked in partnership with the oil and gas industry, the Ute tribe, and state and federal regulators to attack the ozone problem. Since 2010, we have seen a general decline in ozone levels for various reasons. However, the basin is currently designated as non-attainment for ozone, and it appears very likely that the designation, in fact, not very likely, it seems a mathematical certainty that the designation will be bumped up to the next level with more stringent controls in the coming years. The study was designed as an important next step to make sure the controls are targeted as effectively as possible to reduce ozone in the basin. The study will test the following hypotheses: whether reductions of nitrogen oxides, also known as NOx, or of volatile organic compounds, also known as VOCs, will lead to greater ozone reductions in the Uenta Basin area of Utah. 2, whether electrification of oil and gas fields in the basin will permit significant, long-lasting reductions in winter ozone levels. 3, whether the benefits of electricity can offset other NOx emissions such as drilling. And 4, whether electrification can provide an additional option that allows the oil and gas industry to continue successfully operating in the basin. I'm prepared to answer any questions from the Division of Public Utilities, the Office of Consumer Services, or the Commission about how the research fits into the broader area of research in the basin, as well as costs and performance of the study. I can also answer questions about the effects of the office's recommendations on the research study. The office has stated that the Uenta Basin study is very promising, and they support providing step funds, providing step funds for the study subject to 2 recommended conditions: a phased funding approach and a reduction to the funding level. The division recommends the commission reject the study and raises concerns about the limited focus of the study and the overall value of the study. As someone who has conducted and participated in most of the air quality studies that have taken place in the basin, I can assure the commission that this study will provide valuable information that builds upon and supplements other past studies on Uenta Basin pollution. The study has a discrete focus on NOx as the controlling pollutant and the relationship of electrification to reducing NOx emissions. No study like this has been completed, and the findings of the study will add valuable data to the body of research on the basin and on air quality and on ozone in general. The Uenta Basin study on its own will provide the company with solid evidence to inform further pursuit of electricity in the basin. The office's recommendation for a phased funding approach would pose challenges to both the research design and the timeline we have proposed for the study. First, dividing the study into 2 phases would require USU to reorder and divide its goals, which would be especially difficult considering the timing constraints of the funding. This would significantly and unnecessarily increase the amount of work for the study. For example, it would require twice as many modeling runs. In addition, several of the goals for the study are integrated, and knowledge gained from one goal will inform and improve other goals. The increased work caused by phasing the research would also lead to increased costs. The indirect costs are typically included in research study budgets. The study and budget have been designed and reviewed by professionals at Utah State University, USU, a state-owned nonprofit research university. The USU Sponsored Programs Office has verified that the proposal meets all necessary professional research criteria and addresses all required legal and ethical compliance issues, including compliance with Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations, which governs USU's administration of grants. All overhead and indirect costs are set by the Sponsored Programs Office and align with standard rates accepted by government and private funding sources. I'm happy to answer your technical questions about the study. My colleague, Robert Hammer, who is also contributing to the study, is also available to answer questions within his technical expertise, which includes operations of the oil and gas industry and use of electricity for oil and gas industry equipment in the basin. Thank you for your attention. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Dr. Mansfield. I have no further questions for this witness, and he is available for cross-examination and questions from the hearing officer.
Mr. Jenner.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Mansfield.
Morning.
I have a few questions I'd just like to run through with you briefly. Is it accurate that part of the study will evaluate the economics and the economic impact of the conversion of the pumps to electric pumping motors?
That is correct. We've written that into the proposal, but the intention is for it to be a high-level study.
Okay. And you don't have any information on the cost of converting a typical well to electric, do you?
No, I do not.
Okay. And you don't have any information from Rocky Mountain Power on the costs or timeline of extending electric service to serve the wells, do you?
No.
Okay. And how do you intend to research those as part of your study, or how do you plan on doing an economic analysis without the costs?
I guess the best way to answer that is that that's one of the things we intend to study as the study proceeds. Mr. Robert Hammer, who we've already referred to, his organization, SLR, will be heading up that part of the study, and so he may be better able to answer that particular question.
Okay, thank you. Those are the only questions I have. Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
The office has no questions. Thank you.
And I have none. Thank you, Dr. Mansfield.
Thank you.
Ms. Wagner?
I have nothing further for Dr. Mansfield, and unless anyone has questions for Mr. Hammer, the company concludes its presentation in this case.
So if I understand you correctly, the company does not wish to affirmatively call Mr. Hammer as a direct witness, but will make him available to questions?
Exactly, yes.
Mr. Jetter, would you like to ask any questions of Mr. Hammer?
No, I don't need to. Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. And I don't have any. And for the record, and parties are curious, I don't believe me and Mr. Hammer are related or have ever met. So there's nothing else from you, Ms. Wagner?
No, nothing else from me.
Mr. Jetter?
Thank you. The division would like to call and have sworn in Bob Davis, or Robert A. Davis, excuse me.
Mr. Davis, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Mr. Davis, would you please state your name and occupation for the record?
Yes, it's Robert A. Davis, and I am a utility technical consultant for the Division of Public Utilities.
Thank you. And I'm going to take a brief pause from questioning Mr. Davis just to let Dr. Mansfield know that your microphone is still on, and I just didn't want you to have an accidental slip. And also, just on the record, to apologize to Dr. Mansfield for not addressing him correctly in my cross-examination questions. Mr. Davis, did you create and cause to be filed with the commission comments from the division dated April 16th, 2021?
Yes, that's correct.
And do you have any corrections or changes you'd like to make to those?
Just one. On page 4, paragraph 2, I commented that both statute 54-20-105 and 54-20-107 requires the commission to determine that the proposal is in the interest of the large-scale utilities customers. Statute 54-20-107 states if the commission determines that the program is cost-effective and in the public interest.
Thank you. With that correction, would you adopt your comments as your testimony today?
Yes.
And have you prepared a summary of your testimony or your
I have.
comments adopted as testimony?
I have.
Please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Hammer. RMP's application seeks step funds to study the potential for air quality improvement through electrification of pump jacks located throughout the Uenta Basin. Utah State University and the SLR International Corporation team plan to research and report the possible air quality benefits and economics to the oil and gas industry of converting the pump jack power sources from the current use of primarily natural gas to electricity. The division agrees that mitigation of pollution is important and in the broad public interest. However, the division's statutory objectives articulate a narrower public interest that requires a weighing of a variety of factors not merely whether some action may have a general social benefit. The proposed project comes with costs, and those costs should not outweigh the benefits to those who are paying for those costs. In this case, the proposed costs come with no sufficiently concrete benefit to those paying the costs. While research is always speculative, the dearth of information about what might be done with the study's results and what those actions' costs and benefits might be renders the division unable to advocate that the study is in the public interest. As it stands, the proposal is to spend money to determine a narrow scientific question that might have some application to the utilities business if the results are as expected and if a variety of external conditions or decisions occur as a result of the findings. Air quality and studies concerning it are important, but they are not primarily the ratepayer's responsibility. RMP's application has speculated potential benefits that electricity might facilitate to reduce emissions of NOx and volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, that contribute to high ozone events in the Utah Basin area. In addition to the 4 key research questions purported in Rocky Mountain Power's application, the researchers proposed to study the economics and obtain quantitative estimates of the potential air quality improvement from electrification of wells and surrounding equipment in the oil and gas fields located in the Uenta Basin. The division's review of the application found insufficient evidence of a direct or reasonably anticipated benefit to Rocky Mountain Power ratepayers. Rocky Mountain Power presented no evidence regarding the feasibility of electrifying the area in the event the potential benefits materialize, which is perhaps the most significant economic question for the Commission to consider. Rocky Mountain made no evaluation of the extent to which other participants and beneficiaries, including Moon Lake, might benefit or contribute to the project or any future actions stemming from the project. Clearly, the potential reduction of NOx or VOCs is evident and important, but without studying the feasibility of electrification, the cost-benefit equation is empty. Furthermore, the lack of sufficient nexus between RMP's activities and the much broader dispersion of benefits, if they eventually materialize, suggests the program is more appropriately funded through sources other than Rocky Mountain's captive ratepayers. Rocky Mountain's application may not be in the interest of its ratepayers, even if the study is successful in identifying ways electricity can facilitate reduction in the NOx or VOC emissions contributing to high ozone events in the Uenta Basin area. The nexus between the hoped-for air quality benefits and the utility shareholders and ratepayers is not explained well enough to garner the division's support, especially given the near total deficiency of information on what it would actually take to electrify the area and the fact that other potential beneficiaries of improved air quality are not key partners in funding the study. In short, the division believes a study of the Uenta Basin air quality and electrification benefits is likely beneficial, but the application lacks meaningful information to allow assessment of whether any ratepayer benefits are likely to follow. Contrary to the suggestion in Rocky Mountain Power's reply comments that the division is demanding thorough and premature economic study of electrification, the division seeks only a relatively high-level assessment of the nature of the load that might be served and the resources that might be necessary to serve that load. The record contains insufficient information to assess whether electrification is feasible at a reasonable cost, regardless of what the findings yield. As the division noted, based on a rough estimate of well numbers and loads, the resources needed to serve the additional load could be significant. Rocky Mountain Power has offered no assessment or response, even at a cursory level, to these questions asked in data requests. To conclude, the division recommends the Public Service Commission of Utah not approve Rocky Mountain Power's request for $200,715 of STEP funds because it is not in the public interest the division is charged with advocating. Rocky Mountain Power has not demonstrated that its Uenta Basin is in the interest of its ratepayers under Statute 54-20-105 nor the public interest requirement under statute 54-20-107. This concludes my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'd like to move, because I believe I have not done this, I'd like to move to enter into the record of the hearing the April 16th, 2021 comments filed by the division, along with the attached Appendix A, which includes the data request responses.
They're admitted.
Thank you. And I have no further questions for Mr. Davis. He's available for cross-examination and questions from the hearing officer.
Ms. Wegener?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Davis.
Good morning.
It is the division's position that there are not sufficient benefits to ratepayers to justify this program. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you would agree with me that there are a number of Rocky Mountain Power customers that are served in the Uenta Basin, right?
That's correct.
You would also agree with me that there's some oil and gas customers in the Uenta Basin, customers of Rocky Mountain Power, that have already electrified their well sites. Would you agree with that?
I would from the reply comments. I did not know that in the initial comments.
Thank you. Have you been involved in analyzing other proposed programs under Utah Code Section 5420.1051?
Yes, I have.
And you're familiar with that statute?
Pretty familiar, yes.
Would you agree with me that the statute allows for programs to curtail emissions from a thermal generation plant?
Yes.
And that's in place even though there are a number of residents, specifically along the Wasatch Front, who are not Rocky Mountain Power customers, right?
Yeah, I don't know the numbers, but yes, that's correct.
And those folks who aren't the company's customers, they're customers of municipalities, would still benefit from a curtailment of emissions, isn't that right?
Yes.
And the statute also provides for economic development incentives. Is that your understanding?
Can I introduce just a quick objection, and we can continue to the extent it calls for a legal conclusion that Mr. Davis has not represented himself as an attorney, and so these are answers that should be, I guess, viewed in that respect.
That's sustained. Ms. Wegener, feel free to contextualize your question by reference to the statute, but Mr. Moore needn't testify about what he thinks it means.
Okay. I guess my question, and I can't remember what my open question was, but it concerned whether one of the programs in the statute that's authorized would be an economic development incentive rate.
Yes.
Okay. And would it make sense to you, and I understand that you're not a lawyer or a legislator, but would it make sense to you that including programs that incentivize economic development could have been included because the legislature wanted to encourage economic growth through this statute?
Yeah, I think that's correct, but it still falls under if it is within the public interest.
Thank you. Would you agree that the extent to which electrification reduces emissions, which is one of the goals of this study, could affect whether it is economical to electrify oil and gas sites?
Yes, if all the information is there to make that decision or have that understanding.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Davis.
Mr. Moore?
No questions from the Office of Consumer Services. Thank you.
Mr. Jetter?
I have no redirect, and the division does not intend to call any other witnesses, so that would be all that we would like to present today.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, I have nothing for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go to you, Mr. Moore.
The OCS calls and asks to be sworn Bella Vaste.
Mr. Vastag, can you hear me?
Yes,
Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Vaste, could you, for the record, state and spell your name and give your occupation?
Yes, my name is Bela. That's B-E-L-A. Vastag, V-A-S-T-A-G. And I am a utility analyst, and I work for the Office of Consumer Services.
In your capacity as a utility analyst, have you reviewed the filings related to the USU Uenta Basin study in this docket?
Yes, I have.
Have you prepared and filed comments on April 16, 2021, and reply comments on April 23, 2021, and filed them with the Commission?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any changes you'd like to make to these comments at this time?
No, I have no changes.
Do you adopt these comments as your sworn testimony today?
Yes.
Mr. Hammer, at this point, the office would move for the admission of their comments, both the April 16 comments and the April 23rd reply comments.
They're admitted.
Have you prepared a statement summarizing the OCS's position?
Yes, I have.
Would you please proceed with the summary?
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Hammer and parties here today at today's hearing. First, as an initial matter, the Utah Office of Consumer Service, or OCS, appreciates the company clarifying that it is not seeking approval for the Uenta Basin study under Section 107 of the STEP Act. Section 107 requires a showing that a proposed program is cost-effective, and nowhere in its application has RMP provided evidence or even attempted to show that the proposed Uenta Basin study is cost-effective. Therefore, the OCS agrees with the company's clarification at this hearing that this program should be approved only under Section 105 of the STEP Act. The Office of Consumer Services supports the proposed Uenta Basin study in this docket if steps are taken to ensure that ratepayer funds are spent wisely and not wasted. Utah State University, who is the sponsor of the Uenta study funding request, has also requested funding from the Utah Division of Air Quality, or UDAC, for essentially the same project that is being reviewed here today. And UDAC limits indirect costs on proposals that it accepts to 10%. And this limit should also be used for the proposed Uenta Basin study in this docket. USU should only be allowed a 10% adder on its portion of the budget and not on the consultant fees, which are already based on very high hourly rates. By applying UDAC's standard for indirect costs, the OCS recommends that the budget for the Uenta proposal be reduced from the requested $200,715 to $141,197 if it's approved, and as we described in detail in our initial comments. The OCS also recommends that funding for this study, if approved, should be released in two phases. The premise of the Uenta Basin study is that the ozone pollution problem in the basin is primarily caused by nitrogen oxides, or NOx, and not by volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Thus, if the NOx hypothesis is true, electrification of NOx-producing equipment in the basin could solve or at least significantly improve the ozone problem. However, if the NOx hypothesis is found to be false, there is no need to study the electrification of NOx-producing equipment in the basin. Therefore, if approved, the OCS recommends funding be released in two phases. The first phase to determine if the NOx hypothesis is true, Then, only if NOx is found to be the ozone controlling pollutant, the second phase of funding would be released to study how electrification could eliminate the NOx. Otherwise, the funding held for the second phase should be returned to ratepayers. For simplicity, OCS recommends half the funding be released for phase 1 and half for phase 2. That concludes my statement.
Thank you. Mr. Vastag is now available for cross and questions from the hearing officer.
Ms. Wegner, we'll go to you first.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Basin.
Good morning.
Have you been involved in analyzing previous applications for STEP funding?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that there's been, I think, subject to check, 18 programs that have been approved for STEP funding since the program was initially opened?
I don't know the number, but I will trust your estimation.
And isn't it true that some of those programs are research studies that are conducted by universities such as Brigham Young University, University of Utah, and Utah State, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
And isn't it true that those studies that are university conducted by a university also included indirect costs for facilities and administration?
I don't remember specifically, but I mean, it is likely that they did include those costs.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Moore?
No redirect. The office rests.
Thank you. And I have nothing for you, Mr. Vastek. Thank you for your participation. Is there anything else before we adjourn today? Ms. Wegner?
Nothing from the company.
Mr. Jetter?
Nothing from the division.
Mr. Moore?
Nothing from the OCS.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.